Our next speaker. Thank you for coming to the Fermentation Festival. The festival is run by donations, so if you feel so inclined, there's some different QR codes on the back to donate. But our next speaker is Ger Liang Tysk, speaking on the business of fermented foods. So Ger Liang is a chef, sailor, artist, and serial entrepreneur. She founded Red Kettle Foods in 2023, focusing on bringing really good kimchi and Asian lactoferments to her community in rural Maine and beyond. And Ger has a table, Red Kettle Foods has a table out there if you haven't seen it already, and you can check it out after the talk. So let's give it up for Ger.
Thank you, everyone. So here we are, there's a room full of you, there's a room full of people out there who have started fermented foods business. And you're here wondering, maybe I should start a fermented food business. Someone has said to you, this is so good, you should sell it. I'm Ger Liang Tysk, and as she said, I run Red Kettle Foods in Belfast, Maine. Belfast, for those of you who don't know, if you go from Portland, which is where everyone knows about Maine, you ask, do you know anything about Maine? And people are like, I know where Portland is. If you go from 2 hours north of Portland up the coast, that's where I am. So Red Kettle Foods makes kimchi, and Asian lactoferments. We do Japanese pickles, we do Chinese hot sauce, and we've been running this for about 3 years. So, you want to start a food business. Now what? That's why you're here. You're like, I make really good insert fermented food here, or just food products. I've always thought about starting a food business. How hard can it be? You're like, how hard can it be? Why do you want to start a food business? So that's the question I always ask people when they say, I would love to start a food business, how hard can it be? Why do you want to start a food business? Making the food to sell is not the same as enjoying cooking in your home. And just because you're good at doing the thing doesn't mean you'll be good at making money by doing the thing. This is what a lot of people run into. They're artists, they're musicians, they're some sort of creative field. Food is a creative field. I am a chef. And I've been doing private chef and catering and things like that for the last decade. I worked on a boat doing this. That's my background. So I started sailing, I was cooking on the boat, I branched into catering, and then I decided to start my own food business. I'm a musician on the side, and that's also a side gig that I have, a side hustle. So I'm well acquainted with, you're good at doing the thing, but how good are you at business? And so that's the first question I want all of you to think about when you're like, I want to start a food business. I'm great at the food, how good am I at business? So you find when you get into the day-to-day, the business is no longer about really the food. The food comes second to your payroll and your profit and loss statement and accounting and ordering supplies and keeping up with inventory. And then suddenly you're 3 years into your food business and you're like, I've lost the passion for this business. Why am I doing this? So you have to think, what part of me loves just to cook for my family and friends, and what part of me actually wants to make money and do the business, right? So, with that out of the way, what I have here, starting a food business is really interesting. This is the most interesting thing I've ever done in my entire life. It's so fun in a very challenging way. So you can have the feeling of cooking for your family and friends with the challenge of running a business, and with all that together, it's kind of almost like a puzzle or a game, and if you like that sort of thing, putting the pieces together, it's really, really fun. But you have to know that if you're good at doing the thing, doesn't mean that you're good at making the money doing the thing. And a lot of people are like, well, you sold out because you're starting a business. That's not what it is. You can make money doing a thing that you love and you're good at, you just have to know the way. Okay, so you've decided that you want to make money doing the thing. You want to make your product. Here are some good questions. Sleuth on the internet, Google search. Think about this, write it down, you can ask ChatGPT. Where will you make your product? Number one, biggest question. Is it something you can make at home? Probably not, we'll get into that next slide. How will you package your product? Is it in a pouch? Is it in a glass bottle? Is it in a plastic jar? Is it in what size of jar? Where are you going to get your labels? How many labels do you need? These are things that you want to kind of think about before you even think about, oh, my company name is going to be this creative thing. All of these things you need to think about Where will I source these things? If I grow bigger and I'm sourcing it from tiny company in Alaska, am I going to be able to continue to make the same product, or do I have to switch? What channels will you sell in? So many people starting a food business start out in farmers markets. That's totally great. I'm in farmers markets. I didn't start out there. I ended up in farmers markets. So you can go from one thing to another. You can start selling just direct to grocery stores. You can start selling just direct to big food distributors or small food distributors. There are many of them. And who will be involved with the business? Do you want to have a business partner? I don't have a business partner, but a lot of the businesses out in the festival have business partners. And feel free to ask them if you can get close to them with the madness. And do you have a business partner? Like, how did you find it? Sometimes I've heard that having a business partner is like a marriage. If it goes well, it's great. If it goes badly, you can dissolve the business. It can end the business. So, who will be in charge of production? Are you going to make it? Are you going to outsource it? Who's going to do the sales? Is it you? Who's going to deliver it? Is it you? Who's going to the farmers markets? Is it you? A lot of these questions, when you first start out, it's you. You're like, it's me, I'm doing all of it. That's totally fine, that's very normal. And then, for the production, will you manufacture your products yourself? You use a co-manufacturer, also called a co-packer. We can get into that also later. And then the last question, very important, how much capital is required to start your first production run? So unlike making a product at home for your family and friends, in order to sell it, you're going to have to put out what is called a production run, X number of cases, X number of jars, X number of bottles, because if you're going to sell it, you can't show up to the farmer's market or the grocery store with 2 bottles and be like, it's so good, you should buy it. That's not going to work. So you got to think about scale, scaling your little recipe that you're doing right now of your kimchi or your kombucha or your beer into a massive. And massive is relative. You know, if you're doing just like a couple of jars of kimchi right now, and you scale it to 8 cases of 12 jars each, for a first production run, that's pretty massive for a very small company. That's something to think about. All right. Mostly, very important, your product formulation when you are starting a food business must be the same every time. So it must be usually required in grams, but it has to be by weight, and it has to be a recipe that you follow, and it has to be exactly the same every time. This can be difficult for fermentation fanatics, lovers, turned business owners, because fermentation is all about the bacteria, the microbes, the fungi. You just let them do their thing. You can't really do that when you do a fermentation food business, and so you have to make sure your formulation is the same, and then it ferments the same every time. That can be difficult. So there's a lot of scientific food science in there that you might not have thought about when you're just making it for your mom or your boyfriend or your friends down the street. The bacteria and the microbes are doing different things at different speeds in every batch that you ferment, of course. But you have to make sure that the end result is the same, because your customers don't want to buy a jar of kombucha, come back and try it again, and it's totally different. They're like, this brand sucks. I can't, there's no consistency. They're just, playing around. So you don't want that. These are specific details for fermentation businesses. So all food business have to be licensed, but these are specifically for a fermentation business. Very important to think about. Fermented foods are not classified as TCS, which is time and temperature controlled for safety foods, so they do not have to be stored for between 41 degrees and between 41 degrees and 135 degrees is usually considered the danger zone for TCS. So fermented foods, because a lot of them are fermented at room temperature or in that zone, they're not TCS foods. They're also not considered acidifieds or low acid foods, which are pickled with vinegar, right? So jams, jellies, tomato sauce, things like that. Fermented foods don't fall into either of these categories, so you have a little wiggle room. I find it's almost like a black box, because a lot of state and federal agencies don't really understand how to classify fermented foods, because they're technically at temperatures that are unsafe, and they contain bacteria. And so they freak the FDA out, they freak the state agencies out, and you have to kind of explain this. I feel like it's getting better, but you still have to kind of explain this to people that, no, it's okay, the thing is at 55 degrees, but it's not going to kill people, there's no botulism. So just be aware of that when you are starting your business. However, they are more stringently regulated than many other foods. So if you're a baker, whatever, you have very little regulation you can bake out of your house. For a fermented foods producer, you cannot make it out of your house. You must be in a commercially certified kitchen, registered with the state and FDA, no home processing. So that is a large upfront cost. So if you're thinking, oh, it's so easy, I can just make beer out of my house and sell it. Obviously, you cannot do that. But even things like sauerkraut, you cannot do out of your house. You have to be in a commercial kitchen. Depending on your type of fermentation, you probably have your process verified by a food process authority. So a food process authority is somebody, a body or organization or a person that is certified by the FDA, so federal level, to say that your food is safe and you can sell it, especially across state lines. So once your product is verified by a food process authority, you are allowed to sell it across state lines once you have registered your commercial kitchen with the state and the FDA. So that opens a lot of doors. You don't have to do a whole lot of other permitting if you have, say, a sauerkraut or a kombucha or a kefir or something like that. If you are a beer and wine producer, you have a lot more hoops to jump through. Let's see, depending on your type of fermentation, you also might need to have a written food safety plan such as HACCP to comply with federal regulations. So HACCP is one sort of food safety plan that says these are where the things in my kitchen, in my process could go wrong, and here's how I could fix them so they won't happen again. Many states require this. Maine does not require this. We'll get into that in a second also. But I definitely know Rhode Island requires this, and Massachusetts requires it for most fermented foods. Again, beer, wine, cider require additional certification. I am not well versed in that, so I am not the person to ask questions of, but there are a lot of other processes for verification because it is alcohol. All right. So you're still on this train, you're like, I'm gonna do this is not stopping me. So you need to form a business entity. As a food business, it is very easy for someone to sue you and take all your money. So you do not want to be what is called a sole proprietorship, which is literally just you. You can put your name on the business thing and you're like, I'm me, Ger, I'm gonna go out and sell this. If someone ate my food, didn't like it for some reason, felt sick, sued me, they could take all of my money, all of my house, my car, my cat. No one wants my cat. But they could take everything, and there's no separation between me and the business. So you want to make sure that you form a corporation, which sounds maybe a little scary, but it's not that scary, to make you and your business separate entities in the eyes of the law. So if someone sues your business, they cannot take your cat. They can only take your unsold jars of kombucha. So there's a couple of different corporate structures. LLC is probably the most easy. S Corp or partnership, if you have a business card, you can go into a partnership. S Corp is a higher level than LLC, and there's a different tax structure to it. And you can ask any accountant if you have any questions about this. If you want to do this, you should also file for an EIN, Employer Identification Number. And the EIN is at the federal level, and the corporations are at the state level. You will probably, once you start researching this, get a lot of Google ads and targeted ads saying, oh, if you pay this company X amount of dollars, we'll file your LLC for you. We'll take care of all of it. It's so easy. You don't need to do that. Please don't do that. They're scammers. So you can file with the state. Go to the mass.gov website. Go to the Rhode Island website, Maine.gov website. You can file right with the state. It's very simple. You fill out a form, you send it in with your payment, and they come and give you a license. Food processing license depends on the state. These are the different ones for a lot of New England states. I have a star by Department of Agriculture for some reason. I don't remember why. Okay. And here is a sample budget of what you need when you first start. So you don't need $1 million, but you do need something. And this is just an example. Of course, if you're not selling at farmers markets, you don't need the farmers market fees. But a lot of the really expensive things are your commercial kitchen, your HACCP plan if you need one, your business license. For Massachusetts, filing an LLC is $500. For Maine, it's $75. So it really depends on your state. For Maine, also Maine is the only state, I believe, in the country that has what is called food sovereignty. So if you live in Maine and you want to just sell at your local farmers market, you don't need to do any of this. Maine says that there is a right to food enshrined in our constitution, and so you are allowed to sell direct to consumer without going through any of this. So everyone move to Maine. So total $3,910, so almost $4,000, and you haven't sold anything yet. So you do need some savings to go into business. All right, we're coming to an end here. Commercial kitchen resources for Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and Maine. If anyone doesn't live in these states, you go to your state website or your local, your university extension, and they should have resources for you. Commercial kitchens are kitchens you rent by the hour, or sometimes you can have a flat fee for the month for a number of hours. You can start in those without having to buy or rent your own kitchen that you're only in by yourself. So we're very lucky that we have a lot of these resources available. A lot of these kitchens will you go through the process. They might even hold your hand to do the licensing process, the food process authority process. The downside is once you get big enough, you can no longer be in one of these kitchens. They're shared kitchens. You share them with many other food businesses. Once you get big enough, you're going to have to move out, and then you have nothing. You have no equipment because you're using all of their equipment, and they may have very advanced equipment. Some of you have to buy a $20,000 fermenting tank, right? Which they already have in the kitchen. So that's something to think about also. If you want to start small with your own equipment and build from the ground up bootstrap, or you want to start in a commercial kitchen that has all these resources, but also once you're on your own, then you need to rebuy. And you're already so big, because you're 3 or 4 years in, you're like, oh, I haven't really saved up the money to buy this $20,000 fermentation tank. What do I do now? So, but very lucky to have all of these options if you want to start in a shared commercial kitchen. Here are some additional resources. They're just state and university extension resources. So extension is like the farming and food extension arm of universities. So they have a lot of these food safety website links. You can obviously just Google. If you Google Massachusetts, how to start a food business, a lot of these links will come up. I am at the end of my presentation. It's very short. You can email me hello@redkettlekimchi.com. I can take maybe 1 or 2 questions, or you can come find me at my table, Red Kettle Kimchi, out in the festival. Yes?
I know you had it on the board, but you talked about typical costs for the shared kitchen. Was it $30 an hour with a minimum of how much a week?
$30 an hour, usually they will, there usually is a minimum. It really depends on the kitchen. So the average going rate seems to be $20 to $35 or $40 an hour, really depending on the kitchen. So in the greater Boston area, it'll probably be more because rent is more. In Maine, it'll be less because rent is less.
So do you have to, excuse me, prove that you did all of your work in that kitchen?
Yes.
You do?
Yes, so before you start your business, once you get your business license, an inspector will come to that kitchen and inspect you personally, your business. So even though that kitchen has been inspected 100,000 times, exactly.
You can produce.
It's not how quick you can produce, but if you're producing safely. So the inspector will look at all of your specific equipment to your food business and say, okay, you are doing these processes safely, I will certify you to use this kitchen. Even though, say, person next door who was making hamburgers has already been certified, they're a totally different food business, so it doesn't apply to you.
I mean, you can't really do much in 6 hours a week.
Exactly. So you see the price is just going up and up and up. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, there's a residential kitchen allowance in Massachusetts, and I think it might be called cottage kitchen.
It is for baking and for jams and jellies, but not fermented foods, unfortunately.
It says for non-hazardous foods, though.
Yeah, fermented foods falls in that gray area. If you Google more on the mass.gov website, it says fermented foods cannot be produced in a cottage kitchen. So fermented foods are non-hazardous, but they're also kind of hazardous in the eyes of the law. It's very strange.
Yeah. Just as a side, my friend's making kimchi. It's a cottage kitchen, and it's been permitted, so just letting you know.
Oh, interesting, because the mass.gov website says definitely you cannot. So maybe it depends on the town. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe.